The chalk snapped in half the moment laughter filled the lecture hall. It wasn't cruel laughter at first, more like polite amusement, the kind that rolls through a room when everyone knows who belongs at the front and who does not. At the center of it all stood a janitor in a faded blue uniform, hands rough from years of scrubbing floors, staring at an equation that had just been written on the board like a challenge thrown at fate itself. The professor had smiled arrogantly when he said the words, half joking, half mocking, certain no miracle would dare interrupt his certainty. Solve this equation, he had laughed, and I'll marry you. What no one knew in that moment was that the room was seconds away from falling into a silence so heavy it would change lives forever. Before the story pulls you any deeper, take a moment right now. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and hidden brilliance, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them most. The janitor's name was Elias, though almost no one knew it. To the students and faculty, he was just a background presence, the man who arrived before sunrise and stayed long after the halls emptied, sweeping away chalk dust, spilled coffee, and forgotten ambitions. He moved quietly through the university, eyes down, shoulders slightly hunched, not because he was ashamed, but because life had taught him that invisibility was safer. Years ago, he had been someone else entirely, a promising student with a hunger for knowledge so fierce it kept him awake at night. But poverty, illness, and responsibility had slowly stripped that future away. When his father died and his younger siblings needed food, Elias traded textbooks for mop buckets without ceremony. Dreams, he learned, do not feed families. That morning, the professor, renowned, celebrated, and painfully proud, had been lecturing about a complex mathematical theorem. His reputation was built on brilliance and ego in equal measure. Students admired him, feared him, and competed for his approval. He enjoyed it all, especially moments where he could remind the room who held power. When he noticed Elias lingering near the door, waiting to clean after class, something in him sparked, an urge to entertain himself. He paused mid-lecture, glanced at the janitor, and casually asked if he understood what was written on the board. The question alone drew chuckles. The follow-up, the mock proposal, drew laughter. Elias hadn't planned to speak. He never did, but something in his chest tightened when he looked at the equation. It wasn't unfamiliar. In fact, it was painfully familiar, like seeing an old friend across a crowded street. Years ago, he had solved variations of it for fun, scribbling answers in the margins of borrowed books. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear of failure, but from the weight of memory. He knew what would happen if he spoke. Ridicule, embarrassment, reminders of what he had lost. Still, a quiet voice inside him whispered that truth mattered, even if no one wanted to hear it. As he stepped forward, the room shifted. Whispers rippled through the seats. The professor raised an eyebrow, amused, certain this would end quickly. Elias picked up the chalk. It felt light in his hand, almost fragile, as if it might crumble under the pressure of expectation. He stared at the board, not just seeing symbols, but patterns, relationships, logic unfolding like a familiar melody. His mind worked calmly, methodically, the way it always had when numbers spoke louder than the world around him. At first, the scratching of chalk was drowned out by soft snickers. Then something changed. The professor's smile faded slightly as he noticed the structure of the solution taking shape. It wasn't random. It wasn't guessing. It was precise. Elegant. Students leaned forward. Phones lowered. Breaths held. Elias moved with confidence that surprised even himself, writing line after line, simplifying, transforming, until the final answer stood clear and undeniable. When he set the chalk down, the room was silent. The professor froze. Not figuratively, physically. His eyes darted between the board and Elias, searching desperately for an error, a flaw, anything to restore the balance of superiority. But there was none. The solution was correct. More than correct, it was beautiful. A way of solving the equation that even he hadn't considered. For the first time in years, the professor felt small. The laughter that had once filled the hall now felt like an accusation hanging in the air. Elias waited, heart pounding, unsure if he had crossed a line. He wasn't there to humiliate anyone. He only wanted the truth to exist, even for a moment. The professor cleared his throat, words failing him. He managed a stiff acknowledgement, dismissing the class early. Students filed out in stunned silence, some glancing back at Elias with newfound respect, others with disbelief. The professor stood alone, staring at the board as if it had betrayed him. News traveled fast. By afternoon, whispers of the janitor who solved the impossible equation spread across campus. Some dismissed it as exaggeration. Others sought Elias out, asking questions, testing him with problems. Each time, he answered quietly, accurately, never boasting. His past began to surface, his unfinished degree, his academic awards from years ago, the sacrifices that had rerouted his life. Faculty members took notice. Administrators called meetings. Opportunities that once seemed dead stirred back to life. But the greatest change came from within Elias himself. Solving that equation hadn't just impressed a room, it had reminded him who he was. For years, he had believed that his potential had an expiration date, that brilliance wasted was brilliance gone forever. Now, standing taller, speaking a little more, he felt something dangerous and wonderful returning: hope. It scared him more than despair ever had. Hope demands courage. It asks you to risk disappointment again. The professor, meanwhile, wrestled with his own reckoning. Pride had been his armor, and it cracked publicly. He avoided Elias at first, then finally sought him out, not with arrogance but with humility he had never practiced before. He apologized, not just for the joke, but for the years of dismissing people based on appearances, for confusing titles with worth. It was an apology that shook him as much as it surprised Elias. Doors opened. Elias was offered a chance to finish his education, fully funded. He hesitated, thinking of his siblings, his responsibilities. The university worked with him, adjusting schedules, providing support. The same halls he once cleaned at night now welcomed him during the day, not as an outsider, but as a student again. Every lecture felt like reclaimed time. Every solved problem felt like healing. The professor kept his word in a way no one expected. The marriage joke faded into irrelevance, replaced by something far more meaningful: respect. He became Elias's mentor, not out of obligation, but admiration. Watching Elias learn, contribute, and eventually teach others forced the professor to redefine success, not as dominance, but as the ability to recognize greatness wherever it appears. Years passed. Elias graduated with honors, then stayed on, teaching students who reminded him of himself, quiet, overlooked, hungry for someone to believe in them. He never forgot the mop bucket, the early mornings, the laughter. Those memories grounded him. They reminded him to treat everyone with dignity, because brilliance does not announce itself with titles or uniforms. Near the end of this story, if it has touched your heart even a little, please pause and engage with this video. Like it, share it, and subscribe, not for us, but for every unseen soul who needs to hear that their worth is not defined by where they stand today. And before the final moments, we have one special request. Comment below with the words, "I believe in hidden potential," if you truly believe that no one should be underestimated. On the day Elias gave his first public lecture as a professor, he stood at the podium, scanning the room filled with students from every background imaginable. He began not with formulas, but with a reminder that intelligence is not owned by privilege, that circumstances can delay dreams but do not erase them, and that kindness can unlock doors that arrogance never will. Somewhere in the back of the hall, a custodian paused, listening, unseen. Elias smiled, knowing exactly where that man stood. The equation that once silenced a room had done more than prove a point. It had rewritten lives. And for everyone who watched it happen, it left behind a quiet, powerful truth. Never laugh at someone standing in the shadows. You might just be laughing at a future that will outshine your own.